Today at GialloZafferano, I'm going to introduce my Milanese Saffron and Rice. It's a new way of seeing this classic dish of Milanese cuisine by means of lightness and, of course, taste. Now let's see how it's done. First I start making the saffron sauce, so I'll need water, some salt, some sugar, saffron, this is a Lombard saffron which is grown near Como, and some maize starch. I'll warm the water, water is boiling, I add, while stirring with a whisk, the maize starch. I let it thicken slowly. I let it simmer for a few seconds. I take it off the stove. Let it cool slightly. This is the result of the sauce. Very silky, very smooth. Now we can add the saffron pistils. Do you see its quality? I normally store saffron in the refrigerator to keep it alive and to keep the moisture that is needed to avoid breaking it. Pulverize it. My suggestion is to select the saffron that has this characteristic. It has the 3 pistils attached to the base. It means that the producer, the farmer, once he has opened the flour, has applied a respect criteria, keeping the 3 pistils together. This is the bare minimum of how such an important product must be treated. I'll add a touch of sugar and a touch of salt. All this operation must be done like this, away from the fire where the temperature, as you see I touched the pot, reaches roughly 70 degrees, 65 more or less. And then there's this movement for it to be incorporated into the sauce. So it's an operation that I call an infusion. Keeping this temperature at 70 degrees gives you the full scent of saffron. So no more sauté, no more butter or oil with onion at the beginning, but only an absolute respect for what are the raw materials, especially since it's a saffron from my homeland. I suggest not to use cutlery, like whip, spoon or fork or other things, because you would still risk splitting this beauty, that is the pistil. This is the operation, you see, that slowly saffron releases its color, but above all, it keeps its natural shape, which is that of the long pistil. Okay, so we are around 50 degrees or so now. See that I touch it with my hand. I prepared in slang it is called baby bottle. Where I pour the sauce, see the color that already begins to gain intensity. Perfect perfume. And that's how long it takes to cook rice. So first the sauce. Sauces are the basis of great kitchen, as Escoffier used to say. I can confirm. This is a sauce, you've seen it's the secret ingredient of the kitchen, that is water. So there's only pure water and saffron. Let's move on to the preparation of rice. Of course, the first choice must be for very high quality rice. I use a Carnaroli rice aged 18 months, because the smell of the grain and the consistency of the rice is maintained in these 16-18 minutes of cooking. Grana Padano 24 months, then a sweet butter, drop of vinegar, little salt and lemon zest. Let's start adding the rice to the hot pot, and we toast it. The fundamental thing for this operation is, of course, to keep going, because underneath there's intense heat, and the toasting I do is to make sure that the most important ingredient of this dish can express its best. Touch it with my fingers, you see that there's a little bit of rice powder stuck on them. Only to understand when it is hot to the right point. This operation is very important because eventually it will be the one that will really give the main feature to this dish. I'll say the name again, Milanese Saffron and Rice. It's a dish that I dedicated to Milan. I believe that in the Milanese cuisine, so wide and with so many facets, there is room for renewing and refreshing what was really classic. So less is more, and I'd say you saw we didn't add onion, we didn't add butter, no fat, because the smell of the cereal has to be the core of the dish. Therefore, this is perhaps the most important operation in order to complete the rice dish with the other ingredients. Okay, when you touch it, I feel the heat on my fingers right now. You can at the same time smell it, and you'll smell strong scent of cereal. Do 6, 7, 8 times this to make sure the perfume comes out. A little bit the curry method, where the spices are toasted without fat, with nothing, just to intensify the scent. We're doing this with the cereal, but the technique is that. Okay, now there's an intense smell of rice. I think even operators can smell it. Here aside I have hot water, fresh, not salty. I'll lower slightly the heat of the stove. Stirring every now and then without mistreating the grain and letting it cook gently. Just to keep the shape of the rice intact. This is the beginning. Then we let it cook for 16 minutes, more or less. I add another drop of water, always stirring as little as possible. The most important thing to do is to taste it, to see if the cooking is what you want or not. I like it very al dente, almost crispy inside. Okay, cooking done. Very important operation to do is this. Move away from the heat, as I did before with the sauce. Let it rest for about 30 seconds, more or less. The rice, the temperature drops a bit. The operation is a bit... you see that I always touch the pots just to understand that the temperature must be constant, not too high, especially for such delicate ingredients, one of which is rice. Another thing, I cream it with a little bit of seasoned Grana Padano, aged between 24 and 27 months, depending on what the season is and how one wants the taste, and then a sweet butter. The weight for the rice is precisely because I want it to be a very creamy cream. The moment you put the grana cheese, it's a hot pot and put butter. There's a kind of cooking of cheese and then tears, which is something I don't want. I want it to be very creamy, very silky. This reason, it is always good to let it rest, always keep a small pot of hot water aside and add it if needed, depending on your taste, and add the amount of Grana cheese you want, same for butter. The more the rice rests, and the less butter or dairy products can be added, because the rice's own starch already makes the rice creamy, so it is also a factor of well-being, taste without exceeding in the use of fat. In this case, very little butter, because I want that light dairy smell. Lemon, another important touch, reminds me a lot of the risotto of my mum. There was always the veal shank, and there was always the gremolata. So a part of rosemary and lemon unnaturally removed all that was meat. Remove the rosemary and kept the lemon. The lemon differs because, of course, it must be an untreated lemon. And the use of lemon in this case is that of aromas, essentially perfumes, oils. So with this fantastic grater, lightly, just remove only the first part. You see? It's just one that contains the real scent of lemon. Many times the lemon is confused with the acidity. Instead, the acidity is a part of the lemon, which most of the time is less interesting for the dishes. So in this case, I only take these little bits of skin from the lemon. Then of course I remind you that the part slightly under the skin is white, and therefore bitter, and I don't need the bitter in this rice. Another important thing for digestion, and to detect even more that smell of cereal that I gave to rice in the roasting, I add white wine vinegar. We go for contrasts here too. Where there is a part a little more starchy, also part sour. Where there is some sugar, but some salt. Where there is the crunchy, but the soft. So this is the cuisine, the balance of contrasts that naturally very well identifies the restaurant DOP. Then gently, here, this is the perfect creaminess. I add a little more water, and lastly the salt. Why lastly? Because I added dairy that contains a part of flavor. So to avoid making mistakes or being too salty at the end, I add it like this. Of course, it must be a fine, very fine salt, because otherwise it wouldn't melt at the right time. An important thing to do before serving it to the diners is this operation. Another pinch of salt, perhaps? Perfect. This is the creaminess, you see, which is to be called wave, and the temperature is no longer high. White plate, 1 ladle, when it expands like this, the cream is perfect. You see that the grain is incorporated in the little butter and Grana cheese that I put in. Then it becomes a white sheet. The sauce is ready. You can see the color from the beginning. You can't see the pistils intact, and I promise you that the scent is here. Let's ask the crew. Do you confirm? Perfect. The spiral that I made was made for a very logical reason, because I want that in every spoonful of rice. I want both the cereal and the rice and the saffron to be tasted, so I thought to give it this shape, to give it this spiral. Just for a matter of taste. I believe that the new Milanese rice should be tasted with a spoon and not with a tiring fork. This is my saffron and rice Milanese, that of course I dedicate to my city.